all you can and you're running with kings. But how far could you go if you run with the wind? And the chances you take are what give you wings, and you can fly.
Welcome back to our Civility at Work podcast. I'm Dr. Lou Bayer, and this is session 3, and today we're talking about evidence that incivility is rampant. So one need only turn on the evening news to see that as humankind, we are in crises. All around the globe, this crisis is evident in increasing violence, racism, disregard for resources, workplace harassment, corruption, and inconceivable incivility in public discourse. In addition, and more alarming to me, we are experiencing increasing incidences in widespread apathy, a lack of collective conscience, a deliberate turning away from our responsibilities to each other as human beings, and a troubling inability to engage effectively and civilly. Related to this, and as an extreme example of incivility, my heart hurts knowing that an estimated 35,000 people die every day due to genocides in places like Myanmar and South Sudan. Of course, most of us, myself included, are insulated from this type of extreme incivility, but incivility occurs on a continuum, and although not as extreme as war, we do feel its impact closer to home too. Looking at workplaces, which is the focus for civility experts, the civility crisis is evident in that a whopping 80% of people are dissatisfied with their jobs, and notably, the number one reason for this dissatisfaction is employees' perceived lack of respect and fair treatment. Because the research suggests that most of us spend a third of our lives at work, an average of 90,000 hours over a lifetime, I would suggest that workplace incivility is a gateway to incivility in the community, to the public square, to civility in our schools, and so on. I would also suggest that this is true of workplaces all around the world. Whether we realize it or not, we carry the impacts of incivility with us wherever we go, and so the toxicity created by incivility manifests as road rage, stress-related illness, social aggression, social isolation, inappropriate behavior in public places and on social media, bullying, harassment, racism, and the list goes on and on. We are seeing the impacts of incivility in our daily interactions, and as you would guess, the research shows incivility is a contributing factor to everything from school shootings to measurable declines in community social capital and to leadership trust indicators. Overall, it's quite a gloomy picture. Christine Polrath, a leading researcher in human performance and the author of Workplace Civility, states that more than 2/3 of people will cut back work effort, 80% of people will lose time worrying about what happened, and 12% of people will report that they've left their job because of an uncivil incident. Not only does incivility decrease performance, but people aren't nearly as innovative, even if they witness civility. So they don't have to be contributing, just witnessing. Can contribute to low confidence, to low creativity, to low teamwork and collaboration. In team settings, incivility causes people to shut down such that they don't dare share information or speak up. They don't discuss errors or inform each other of potential problems. So if you're in manufacturing or healthcare, safety becomes a critical issue. And the other issue is that even witnesses, as well as people who experience incivility, are far less helpful and cooperative and healthy overall. They are actually 3 times less likely to help someone else, and willingness to share drops by more than 50%. So incivility puts people off track, even those people who are trying to push forward. Additional research by Weber, Shadwick, and Powell-Tate in partnership with KRC Research, and this is detailed in the 2019 Civility in America report, found that the majority of Americans, and I believe this is true for Canadians, we're in Canada, perceive incivility to be a very serious problem in our society. The research for 2019 found that frequency of uncivil encounters per week rose sharply in 2018 and remains high, with 10.2 being the average weekly encounter. Notably, the location of uncivil interactions has shifted over the years. Uncivil online interactions have increased from an average of 4.4 weekly in 2018 up to 5.5 in 2019. More than 1/2 of Americans polled, so 54%, expect civility to get worse. Listed in the research for 2019 Civility in America paper were the top 10 consequences of incivility. According to respondents, these are online bullying or cyberbullying, harassment, which includes verbal, physical, or sexual, violent behavior, hate crimes, intimidation and threats, intolerance, people feeling less safe in public places, discrimination and unfair treatment generally, less community engagement, and growing feelings of isolation and loneliness. The preceding research cited is American-based, but we see similar statistics around the world. For example, Incivility results from kindcanada.org showed that 2/3 of employees report a decline in performance as a result of unkind workplaces, and unkind included definitions of incivility. 48% of employees who were exposed to an unkind coworker were significantly more likely to decrease their work efforts, and 38% of employees noted that they intentionally decreased the quality of their work. A study of British workers found that 40% had experienced incivility or disrespect over a 2-year period, with such behavior particularly common in the public sector. In a study of Australian workers, research from Edith Cowan University found that 70% of people polled had experienced rudeness or mistreatment by their coworkers. An additional Canadian study by Bar David Consulting and Canadian HR Reporter showed that incivility affects key business indicators reported by human resource professionals, including 90% say it hurts collaboration, 78% say it hurts talent retention, 52% say it affects brand reputation, 92% agree incivility has negative impacts on productivity, and 80% report an impact on absenteeism. Data collected from employees in various organizations in Singapore shows that incivility is not a rare phenomenon in Asian cultures either. The results of Korean workplace offered evidence of a positive relationship between the experience of workplace incivility and the intention to leave an organization. More specifically, it was found that if a person experiences workplace incivility, he or she is more likely to leave the organization. If the statistics outlined here are any indication, work seems to be at the root of the incivility crises. The majority of us are physically exhausted, stressed, and overextended, and as such, many of us are miserable in our jobs. We are worn down and less resilient than we once were. We are burnt out. Our health is at stake, our home lives and community lives are suffering. We do not have the time or energy to take care of ourselves, and so the idea that we would extend courtesies or consideration to take care of others seems a cost many of us simply cannot bear. To meet the demands of our fast-paced, demanding, and ever-changing work lives, we have resorted to bad habits. As a civility expert, I describe these habits as the coping selfies: self-preservation, self-righteousness, self-promotion, self-centeredness, self-pity, self-denial, self-destruction, and so on. These selfies represent many of the social survival behaviors that desperate people engage in. These habits are a result of individuals focusing on their self-interests at the expense of others. And as I mentioned earlier, there's not necessarily malice here. This is about surviving. Overall, we're experiencing significantly less respect, restraint, and responsibility. These are the 3 tenets that underpin civility, according to Dr. Pierre Forney, professor at Johns Hopkins and author of Choose Civility. Over the past 20 years, training, research, and speaking on civility in the workplace, I am convinced that the conditions and cultures of our workplace are causing much of the desperation that the mass of men and women are experiencing these days. Notably, 80% of people are dissatisfied with their jobs. About 25% of employees say that work is their main source of stress, and 40% say their job is very or extremely stressful. This stress impacts our health. For example, in the United Kingdom, over 13 million working hours are lost every year because of stress. And stress is believed to trigger 70% of visits to doctors and 85% of serious illnesses. Accordingly, 40% of employees say their job is very or extremely stressful, and workplace stress is believed to trigger 70% of visits to doctors, as I mentioned, and 85% of serious illnesses. Very alarming to me, the Center for Disease Control states that adult depression, largely attributed to stress at work, which in turn is largely attributed to incivility, will rank second only to ischemic heart disease as the leading cause of workplace disability in 2020. And if you're listening to this now, you know that we are December 2020. And so the outlook moving forward into 2025 is a rather desperate scenario with regard to workplace stress and depression. If this statistic in and of itself does not present a strong business case for civility at work, honestly, I don't know what does. Rude behavior can come in all shapes and sizes. While some people are fully aware that their behaviors offend, others are unaware that people consider their actions rude. How many of the following behaviors have you experienced in the past 2 weeks? Run a mental list, or if you've got a pen and paper, jot these down as I zip through. And if you're interested in some of these supports or tools, you can email events@civilityexperts.com. This is a civility symptoms checklist. So what behaviors have you experienced? And keep in mind as I run through this list for you, that these behaviors impact us whether you are the perpetrator, whether you are on the receiving end of the behavior, or whether you are simply observing the behavior. So tardiness or lateness, swearing, inappropriate dress, bad attitude, a lack of preparation, interruptions, or someone being interrupted, maybe you are doing the interrupting, barging into someone's workspace, so invasion of privacy, ignoring, someone not listening, disrespect for or destruction of organization's property, rude tone of voice, gossip, yelling, emotional outbursts, time wasting or someone being deliberate about wasting your time, lack of information sharing or withholding, overt sabotage, sharing of inappropriate personal stories, for example, drug-related or sexual in nature, blame game, messes left in common areas, general disrespect for the impact of one's behavior on others, failing to hear someone out, shooting down ideas. So those are just a few. There are many, many indicators of low engagement, and incivility is an indicator of low trust and low engagement, especially when there's a pattern of incivility. Sometimes it's true that the attendance and number of sick days or stress leave requests seems like obvious signs that people are not engaged, but these are not always accurate. For example, you can't just say that because people show up at work they're engaged either. There may be legitimate physical or psychological reasons a person is not coming to work, but because we understand employees to mean that employees are actively choosing to contribute in a positive way beyond their basic job requirements, we, the Civility Experts team, find a stronger indicator of engagement is the overall level of trust. This is because when there are high levels of trust, we typically see correlations between that and employees stating that they feel valued as individuals, they feel their contributions have value, they feel empowered, they feel that they are treated fairly and compensated fairly, they feel empowered to self-direct and make their own decisions, they have a greater sense of shared purpose, they feel they can overcome workplace challenges, they feel supported, and they are happier at work. Even when there is low trust, low engagement, and as a result, high incivility, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. As a civility expert, I hope, and I hope you will too, that people engage and believe in the power of one. I believe that each individual has the power to be better and to do better for ourselves and for each other. And I, as I hope is also true for you, believe that most people truly would do better if they knew what better looked like. For example, in terms of company culture, there's a variety of elements that we can impact. The work environment, the company mission, values, ethics, expectations, goals, and my colleague Christian Masadi would add employee experience as an aspect of workplace culture. Generally, we each have the power to impact the character or culture of an organization, and the culture of an organization is what defines the overall day-to-day experience of employees who live in that culture. From a civility point of view, this culture, this experience, results largely from people treatment, and it's often the character plus aspects of individual personality and leadership team, of course, but often the character of the individuals who lead the organization that has the greatest influence on workplace culture. Over time, because like attracts like, the majority of employees either have similar character as leadership or employees take on, because they feel obligated to do so, the quality and character of those who are leading them. As such, organizational culture becomes a reflection of the character of the people living and leading in that workplace. Traditionally, across sectors, management teams have focused on key performance indicators related to output. For example, how many parts are produced, how many injuries are incurred, how do we achieve our key metrics, how much market share is retained, and so on. However, many forward-thinking organizations, or those who understand the impact of civility at work, are now using a new approach to training that can address key performance indicators related to the people side of their business. And these indicators include engagement, innovation, collaboration, retention, morale, levels of stress at work, as well as health at work, ability to manage change, learning, teamwork, levels of autonomy, general communication, and overall aspects of workplace culture. As such, these organizations frequently have good data, good methods or tools, and good processes in place, but some or all of these are rendered less valuable if there is poor management of the people aspect of the business. Employees in an organization represent an invaluable resource which, when mishandled or underleveraged, can lead to debilitating and long-lasting issues in a workplace. Research shows that when organizations embed civility, including incorporating specific aspects of civility in overall communication, approach, and protocol, and when they engage in strategic skill building, the people aspect of workplace culture is readily addressed, and the result is measurable in terms of social cohesion, employee involvement, trust, collaboration, retention, productivity, engagement, and profitability. So what we encourage is to take a look first at overall indicators and assess how positive or negative your workplace culture is, and then follow along as our podcast continues, our next session, when we'll talk about the elements of a successful civility initiative that any organization can incorporate into their workplace to build a better workplace. Thank you.
The reason why each of us comes to this earth, and your actions will always speak louder than words, and you'll never know what you're capable of until you try.